Iran has 350,000 soldiers in its regular army. Another 150,000 fighters in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps ground forces. It has artillery divisions, armored brigades, mountain infantry units, and 40 years of fortification work along the coastline that borders the Strait of Hormuz. None of that matters. On April 19, 2026, an Iranian cargo vessel called the Tuska tried to run the U.S. naval blockade in the northern Arabian Sea. The guided missile destroyer USS Spruance issued warnings for 6 hours. The Tuska's crew did not comply. Spruance fired, disabling the ship's engine room. Then, rappelling from helicopters after dark, Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit boarded the vessel, cleared it deck by deck, and placed it in U.S. custody. The operation lasted hours. Iran's army was 500 kilometers away in the Zagros Mountains. That boarding is the visible part of a doctrine that the U.S. Marine Corps has been developing, wargaming, and training for since the Cold War. It is a doctrine built around one foundational insight that changes everything about how the Hormuz problem is analyzed. You do not have to fight an army if you never let it become relevant. Iran's land forces cannot protect a tanker sailing through the Gulf of Oman. They cannot protect an island 37 miles off the UAE coastline. They cannot board a helicopter and reach a ship that has already been disabled by a destroyer. The Marine Expeditionary Unit is not designed to fight Iran's army. It is designed to make Iran's army irrelevant by seizing the geography that controls the strait before that army can respond. This video explains how that works and why the 31st MEU on USS Tripoli right now in the Arabian Sea represents a strategic option that no air campaign, no destroyer flotilla, and no missile bombardment has been able to generate in 2 months of the most intense U.S. military operation since the Gulf War. The problem: why air power has a ceiling. By April 2026, the United States had struck over 13,000 Iranian targets. CENTCOM confirmed that U.S. forces had destroyed 80% of Iran's air defense network, sunk 51 naval vessels, eliminated the submarine fleet, struck 29 missile launch bases, and killed the supreme leader and dozens of senior IRGC commanders. B-2s had dropped GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators on the deepest underground nuclear facilities at Fordo and Natanz. B-52s were flying over Iran in daylight, dropping JDAMs. A-10s were hunting speedboats from 100 feet above the strait. Apache helicopters were operating along the southern coast of Iran with impunity. The Strait of Hormuz remained effectively closed. As of mid-April, tanker transits had partially recovered from the wartime low of fewer than 5 per day, but remained at under 10% of the pre-war baseline of 138. Lloyd's List tracked 15 transits on the day of Trump's 8 p.m. ultimatum. Over 500 vessels, a quarter of them oil tankers, sat stranded in the Persian Gulf. Brent crude sat above $100 a barrel. Global energy markets were experiencing what economists were calling the worst oil supply disruption since the 1970s energy crisis. The limitation of air power is specific and consistent. Airstrikes can destroy fixed infrastructure, degrade known positions, and collapse tunnel entrances. What they cannot do is physically hold geography. You cannot bomb the Strait open. You can destroy every IRGC missile battery visible from altitude, and Iran can reposition new systems the next night from warehouses the intelligence cycle has not yet located. You can sink every Iranian surface vessel, and a single IRGC diver can still attach a limpet mine to a tanker hull at 3 a.m. in water, too dark for any overhead sensor to detect. Dr. Lynette Nussbacher, a former military intelligence officer, described the strategic ceiling in an interview with The National during the third week of the conflict. "The highest priority for the Americans is to open up the Strait. Somebody right now is certainly looking at a target pack and asking, can we open the Strait by using land forces?" The answer to that question requires understanding what land forces can do that air power cannot. And understanding that requires understanding the geography Iran has spent 4 decades turning into a strategic weapon. Strategic setup: Iran's island fortress network. The Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest is 21 nautical miles wide. The commercial shipping corridor within it is 6 miles wide. Around and within that corridor, Iran has spent 40 years building a network of fortified island positions that the Naval Institute's April 2026 proceedings analysis described as Iran's layered area denial strategy. 3 island groups define the architecture. Abu Musa and the Greater and Lesser Tunb Islands sit at the western entrance to the strait, directly in the shipping lanes. Iran has administered these islands since seizing them in 1971, a move the UAE still formally contests. Satellite imagery from pre-war assessments identified anti-ship missile batteries and IRGC military infrastructure on all 3. Abu Musa measures approximately 4.9 square miles and sits 37 miles north-northwest of the UAE coast and 43 miles south of the Iranian mainland. The Tunbs sit northeast of Abu Musa, directly astride the sea lanes. Any ship transiting the strait passes within missile range of these positions. Lirak Island sits in the narrowest part of the strait, a few miles offshore of Iran's southern coastline, just 6 miles east of the massive Iranian island of Keshem. Lirak covers 19 square miles, and its military significance is its position. It flanks the final approach to the shipping corridor from the east, overlapping coverage with Keshem's missile complexes. Keshem itself is the crown of the network. At 579 square miles, it is the largest island in the Persian Gulf. It sits barely 5 nautical miles from the main shipping lane. The Hudson Institute analysis confirmed what multiple satellite imagery assessments had shown for years. Iran has installed a significant portion of its anti-ship cruise missile capabilities in subterranean launch positions on Keshem, the same tunnels carved into the mountain granite that give the island both offensive strike capacity and near invulnerability to air attack. When the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer's radar geometry collapses inside the strait because mountains mask inbound missiles until they clear the ridgeline, Keshem's mountains are the specific terrain creating that problem. Finally, Karg Island sits in the northern Persian Gulf, 410 miles northwest of the strait, 16 miles off the coast of Iran. It hosts approximately 90% of Iran's crude oil export infrastructure. It is not a strait control node. It is Iran's economic nervous system. Seizing it does not open the strait. It compresses the economic vice around the regime faster than the strait closure alone can do. Together, these islands form a geographic control architecture that Iran has designed specifically so that dominating the strait does not require winning a conventional military engagement at sea. It requires controlling positions that are ashore, or so close to shore that the distinction barely matters. The Marine Expeditionary Unit is the force designed to take those positions. The military limitation: why the Navy cannot do this alone. The U.S. Navy's surface fleet is built for blue water dominance. Its destroyers, cruisers, and carrier strike groups own the open ocean. They can conduct precision strikes, air defense, anti-submarine warfare, and surface combat at ranges that no other nation's fleet approaches. What they cannot do is land 2,200 Marines on a fortified island, hold it against counterattack, and deny Iran the ability to reposition missile systems to the next ridge. The Naval Institute's analysis of island seizure options was explicit about why surface ships alone cannot generate this effect. Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and underwater drones could target the amphibious assault ships and landing craft necessary to put Marines ashore. The risk to U.S. forces would increase significantly if Iran successfully mined a portion of the Strait. The threat Iran poses to the U.S. Navy's surface ships has required the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group to operate in the Arabian Sea. The Navy likely could not position its ships close enough for the Marines' amphibious assault vehicles to launch. This is the core operational constraint. The conventional amphibious doctrine, beach landing, assault craft, tracked vehicles across the surf zone, requires the amphibious ships to close within 3,000 to 4,000 yards of the objective. In a corridor where Iran has anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles in underground coastal tunnels, sea mines, and armed drone boats, closing to that range with a ship carrying 2,500 Marines is an enormous risk. The doctrine the 31st MEU is trained for at Hormuz solves that constraint by removing the beach entirely. The solution: how the MEU bypasses the Army. USS Tripoli is an America-class amphibious assault ship. The critical design decision that makes it relevant here is what it does not have: a well deck. The traditional well deck, the flooded internal bay that holds landing craft and amphibious vehicles, was eliminated from the America class to maximize aviation capacity. Tripoli carries approximately 20 F-35B Lightning II stealth fighters of Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 121, the Green Knights. It carries MV-22 B Osprey tiltrotor aircraft of VMM 265. It carries AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters and CH-53K King Stallion heavy lift helicopters. It carries the full aviation support infrastructure to sustain continuous flight operations. The result is what U.S. defense planners call a helicopter-heavy force. The national analysis described the operational concept directly. USS Tripoli could be optimized for aviation with loads of helicopters on board. A helicopter-heavy force gives the Marines the ability to do an air assault on targets that have already been hit from the air by U.S. and Israeli fighter jets. Air assault changes the entire geometry of the operation. Instead of approaching from the sea at 3,000 yards and crossing a mined beach under fire, Marines load into Ospreys and King Stallions 40 miles away in the Gulf of Oman, fly at low altitude using terrain masking and electronic warfare to defeat early warning radar, and land directly on the objective. The island's beach defenses, mines, wire obstacles, covered fighting positions oriented seaward, are bypassed in the first seconds of the operation because the assault arrives from above, not below. The first is visit, board, search, and seizure operations. VBSS is the Marine Corps' maritime interdiction capability. Teams trained to board ships at sea, neutralize resistance, and take custody of vessel and crew. The Tuska seizure on April 19th demonstrated this at operational scale. Marines from the 31st MEU rappelled onto the vessel after dark from helicopters launched from USS Tripoli, while the Spruance provided surface fire support. The operation unfolded entirely at sea, in international waters, against a vessel whose Iranian crew had no Army battalion they could call for backup. Fortune magazine confirmed that as of mid-April, Marines were conducting close-quarters training aboard Tripoli specifically for maritime interception operations. The photos, released by CENTCOM on April 15th, showed the training in progress in the Arabian Sea. The second role is blockade enforcement. CENTCOM announced a naval blockade of all Iranian ports on April 13, 2026, covering the Arabian Gulf, Gulf of Oman, and Arabian Sea. The blockade is enforced by USS Tripoli's embarked force along with the destroyer screen from the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. By April 18th, 23 vessels had been directed to turn around or return to Iranian ports. Iran's response, attempting to reassert control of Hormuz by firing on tankers, generated exactly the kind of at-sea engagement the MEU is equipped to dominate. The third role is contingency raid capability. The National quoted Dr. Nusbacher on the option the MEU's presence generates. The Marines could be used for commando raids on the Iranian Hormuz littoral, taking out threats to shipping such as missile batteries or mine stockpiles that are difficult to hit from the air. HIMARS rocket artillery from the 31st MEU's Organic Fires element has already been documented striking Iranian targets. The combination of F-35B fixed-wing air cover, AH-1Z attack helicopter fire support, MV-22 air mobility, and an infantry battalion trained for maritime raids gives the MEU a complete combined arms package for limited objective operations along the coastline, against exactly the shore-based threats that the Navy's destroyers cannot engage because terrain masking defeats their radar. The bigger implication. The Naval Institute's Proceedings article on island seizure, published in April 2026 under the blunt title Seizing Iranian Offshore Islands, High Risk, Low Payoff, offered the most honest cost-benefit analysis available. The risk calculations are serious. Iranian ballistic missiles, drones, and sea mines could target the amphibious ships supporting any landing. Holding a seized island against counterattack requires sustained resupply under fire. Seizing Karg Island, the economic leverage option, would place U.S. ground forces 16 miles off the Iranian mainland in a position the analysis described as a location Iran is aware of and has taken steps to strengthen its defenses. One defense analyst described it plainly. It's a very small island. It's right off the coast. It will become a drone and missile magnet. SOF News. April 3rd analysis added the strategic cost. Even if seizure is feasible at the tactical level, it creates an indefinite U.S. military presence that Iran can contest with standoff weapons for months while the global economy continues to pay the price of a closed strait. These constraints are real, and the debate in Washington reflects them. Trump had not, as of late April 2026, ordered an island landing. The Iran war was at a political inflection point. Ceasefire negotiations in Islamabad, an ultimatum threatening strikes on civilian infrastructure, a fragile truce in Lebanon scheduled to expire. The MEU was in position, training, enforcing the blockade, conducting VBSS operations, but had not been ordered to take ground. That is the precise strategic value of a Marine Expeditionary Unit. It does not have to execute the operation to change the calculation. The option's existence changes Iran's calculus. Iran built its Hormuz strategy on a 40-year assumption that the United States could project air power and naval force into the region, but that ultimately Iran controlled the physical geography of the islands and the coastline, and that no American force would physically contest that control without accepting casualty risks that Washington's political system would not tolerate. USS Tripoli, with 2,200 Marines and 20 F-35Bs in the Arabian Sea, is a direct answer to that assumption. It does not tell Iran that the U.S. will seize the islands. It tells Iran that the U.S. can, on days of notice, not months, with an air assault force that bypasses beach defenses, that arrives before Iranian army reinforcements can respond, and that can hold the objective long enough to change the strategic equation. Iran's 350,000 soldiers are mobilized in the mountains of western Iran, in Tehran, along the Iraq border, across the country's interior. They are exactly where they were before Operation Epic Fury began. Not a single army division can respond to a Marine Osprey assault on Abu Musa before the objective is taken and defended. They are simply too far away, in the wrong terrain, in the wrong branch of service. That is not a failure of Iran's army. It is the intended operational outcome of a doctrine the Marine Corps spent decades designing. The MEU bypasses Iran's army because the MEU was built for exactly the geography the army cannot defend: the islands in the Strait, the coastline ledges where missile batteries hide, the vessels at sea where sovereign control meets the edge of enforcement. On April 19, 2026, Marines rappelled onto the deck of the Tosca after dark, 500 kilometers from the nearest Iranian soldier, and placed the ship in American custody while Iran's entire ground force watched from the mainland. That is the bypass.